for the oops, for the Extreme Access Focus Group. And Jamie Porter, who will be leading the next panel, is the facilitator for the Extreme Environments Focus Group, which is also kind of like a co-host of this meeting, because with all of these technologies, not only do we have to get into weird and dangerous places, but they also have very extreme environments. They may have very different thermal properties, radiation properties, all of these things. So both of them are very key folks for you to chat with as you're discussing some of these technologies. So there they are. And here is Jamie.
Okay, I'm gonna take this off because I know what's gonna happen if I keep it on. It's not gonna go well. So again, I'm Jamie Porter. I am a radiation engineer in my day job, but here today to talk about some of our flight demonstrations that are going on. So we have a panel. We have one in person and 4 beautiful faces that we will see on the screen soon. The first one we have is Dr. Danette Allen, who is the NASA Deputy for Robotics and Autonomy. Dr. Allen is NASA's Senior Technologist for Intelligent Flight Systems and Deputy Lead of the agency's System Capability Leadership Team for Autonomous Systems. We also have Jason Schuler, who is NASA Project Manager for ISRU Pilot Excavator. Jason's a mechanical engineer and founding member of the Swamp Works, a team at Kennedy Space Center devoted to developing robotic technologies to use space resources. He's also one of the co-inventors of Razer, aka Regolith Advanced Surface Systems Operation Robot, and has spent about 14 years developing technologies that interact with extraterrestrial regolith. Daniel Andrews is the NASA project manager for Viper. We've heard about Viper a little bit today. He is the director of engineering at NASA Ames, detailed there to lead the first U.S. robotic rover, Viper. Dan Hendrickson, we have here with us today, is from Astrobotic, covering the CubeRover. Dan leads Astrobotic's technology business development efforts and growth, which include 2 lunar lander systems, missions, and more than 15 lunar payload customers to date. And Matt Atwell is at Intuitive Machines. He's the project manager for Deployable Hopper. Matt is an engineer and project manager at Intuitive Machines. He's currently serving as a program manager for the Hopper and is responsible for leading the development, testing, integration, and execution of the spacecraft demonstration mission on the lunar surface. So the way I want to do this today is we're going to go through and let them talk a little bit, share some slides about their technologies, and we're going to take questions real time with each person. So if we could start with Dr. Allen.
Well, hi, just checking. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, very good. So yeah, I created a couple slides just for a brief introduction. I am Dr. Danette Allen and have been in the highly automated complex systems and autonomy game for my entire career at NASA. I just celebrated 30 years. So I'm going to try to cover 30 years in about 30 seconds here to give some folks a sense of, what my experience has been with robotic systems, but also how we got here and what my thoughts are for the future of autonomous systems and robotics. So, working from left to right, I graduated from NC State with a focus on artificial intelligence just in time for the AI winter. So the AI winter hits, and I was lucky enough that NASA was hiring in an adjacent area, which is real-time flight software systems. And so I had, I really peaked right out of the gate. Was a lead developer on a project called Light, which was the first LiDAR in space, and we were primary payload on STS-64. That's a picture of me standing in the bucket in the shuttle bay of Discovery. And so these instruments, all of these instruments that are listed here on the left, Sage 3, which is flying on ISS, Calypso, which is part of the Science A train, currently orbiting and maps on Mir, which was a Pathfinder mission for our collaboration with the Russian Space Agency. And I got to spend a good bit of time in Russia then. Were all robotic missions. They were all robotic remote sensing instruments. And so I got to see nearly all of these from concept to flight. So I've been lucky to have a great deal of experience, not only as a software / autonomy person, but also as a systems engineer. So did that for about half my NASA career, and then decided, as much as I enjoyed engineering, wanted to see how I might do as a researcher. Went off to UNC Chapel Hill, earned my PhD there, and was able to renew renew my interest in AI in general, because I was able to focus on tracking and motion capture systems. So autonomy is not just just AI. Autonomy is more than AI, and AI is not just machine learning, right? AI includes sensors and if you will, the thought processes that are behind understanding where you are in the world, what the world is doing, and what actions are safe to take. So that was a lovely way to rejuvenate my interest in AI. Came back and became super interested in ModSim and how we could use that to increase the pace of our development, find problems early, work with systems when they were still in a digital form before we actually cut metal. And then maybe 10 years ago or so, I was very lucky to be able to lead a team of very talented researchers and engineers at Langley under the Autonomy Incubator. And so that's how I landed in this world of autonomy. And it sounds like this was all planned, but these were just opportunities that came my way that I was very quick to say yes to, and it's been a crazy journey. That was a little more than 30 seconds, I know, but there's a transition here. So if you look across this, there have been simulators involved in every aspect of my career at NASA. And those simulation capabilities have become more and more complex, more and more powerful, and the fidelity of them has increased a good bit over time. So if I take all four of these focus areas, which is the actual space missions, artificial intelligence, simulation systems, and systems include the humans, and autonomy, one of the things we realized is that as we're thinking about the infrastructure on the surface of the moon, as we're thinking about the systems that perhaps we want to launch into deep space, like a 20-meter telescope, I think Terry had a picture of that in his charts, we are going to need simulation capabilities on Earth, because there are just things we're not going to be able to test as much as we would like to here, either temporally or spatially. The systems are just too large, or the sort of persistent performance that we need, the persistent presence, will just be too much. So I think we might need to, if you go to the next chart, rethink our approach. So we have a pipeline. A lot of people do this. You go from sim. If you work in the world of autonomy, you might try a 2D test and evaluation, or 2D RDT&E, and then maybe you start, maybe you move to UAVs. Learn what you can in the air before you ever actually get to space. This is a pipeline we use, and it's been pretty successful. And of course, that's followed by operations. If we think a little bit about pulling that operations arrow back, build our simulation so that it can take us through the full RDT&E pipeline and actually even be used in operations, we're starting to get to the idea of a digital twin. And I use this phrase because it's familiar, but really what we're talking about is a digital ecosystem. Think about all of the infrastructure on the lunar surface, and all of the multiple different agents that would have to work together, work collaboratively, and work synchronously to get the job done. We are really talking about a twin sim or a digital ecosystem. And so I would say this is the key, I believe, to our robotic flight demonstrations from here, as these systems have become so complex and gone from a single article, a vehicle, or say an instrument, to again, an ecosystem. And with that, I'll close. Thank you.
So we have a question on Slido for you.
Mhm.
What was the AI winner you mentioned, and what did it cost us in terms of development of autonomous systems?
Oh, okay. So yeah, so there was a lot of excitement around AI, and I'll go ahead and date myself. I was an undergraduate in the late 80s and really focused on that as an undergraduate. You know, anybody in the room remember Lisp, right? We were all going to transform the world with artificial intelligence. And I think when AI didn't live up to what I would argue were the expectations that perhaps weren't founded in reality, it became oh well, that didn't work, we're going to move on to other things. And this is true in a lot of disciplines. You know, disciplines will become very popular, but then when they don't become the reality that people are expecting, even if their expectations are not appropriate, certain disciplines will fall out of favor. And that's what happened with AI. Luckily though, the world is a cyclic one, and you know, here we are, we're back. And so I'm able to take that passion and combine it with all the experience that I've had over the 3 decades at NASA, and I'm very excited about the future of autonomy as it you know, as it will build on the foundations of AI and machine learning and everything we know about complex automated systems. To be autonomous, you know, you don't have to have machine learning. You know, autonomy is a state. It's an independence, right, from some external system. It could be the ground, for example. And how that autonomy is achieved is tailored to any given mission.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Okay, next up we have Jason Schuler.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to give you guys an overview of the project that we've started last year called ISRU Pilot Excavator. Next slide, please. All right, so this project is a GCD project in STMD to build a robotic excavator to demonstrate excavation of up to 10 metric tons of regolith on the lunar surface. This is based on a robot that we've been working on called Razer. Stands for the Regolith Advanced Surface Systems Operations Robot. You can see a picture of our current generation of Razer on the picture on the far right. This is a 60 kilogram, a little over 65 kilogram vehicle without any regolith in it. That's looks quite different from a lot of the excavators that you may have seen on Earth. And that's on purpose. There's a real challenge to doing excavation in a low gravity environment. With a vehicle, they have to launch on a rocket and be cognizant of the mass that you're launching. Most of the terrestrial excavators rely on mass to give themselves traction. And the traction is what they use to react to excavation forces. We really don't want to be as inefficient to just put a bunch of steel on an excavator so it weighs a lot and fly it on a rocket. And then even if you do, you land on a low gravity body like the moon with 1/6 gravity of Earth, and you still don't have the traction that you would on Earth. And so we have to think about how to do excavation differently in that environment. So this was kind of the genesis of Razer. Razer uses digging tools called bucket drums. And we put a set of these bucket drums on each end of the robot. And the bucket drums, they dig towards each other at the same time. And what this does is allows the excavation forces on either end of the robot to react off of one another at the same time. This eliminates the need for traction to react that excavation force and allows us to do excavation with a robotic vehicle that's very low mass and very, very efficient. The bucket drums themselves, I'll just mention, they're also a bit unique. They have these scoops that are staggered around the outside of the drum. These small scoops that are continuously rotating around the drum reduce our excavation forces as well. Instead of taking a large blade-wide scoop at any given time, your average excavation force is only the width of a 2-inch scoop, for example. The drum itself is hollow. There's an internal baffling system so that as regolith goes into the drum, it recirculates and gets trapped inside the drum, and you can use this vehicle to transport the regolith to wherever you want reverse the rotation of the drum, and the regolith comes back out the same scoops that it was captured in. So we've been working on this project for several years. You can see a small prototype to the left that we call Mini Razer. This is an educational version. It's about 15 kilograms, 3D printed using inexpensive components. So universities and other students could get involved with software development for this project. So what we're proposing and working on for this ISRU pilot excavator project is about a 30 kilogram class excavator. So in between those two scales. And we will demonstrate this on a future Eclipse flight to do excavation at the scale that we would need for an ISRU pilot plant that would fly as a follow-on. Next slide, please. So, the primary goal, what we're doing here is reducing that risk of excavation. It was mentioned before, I think Terry mentioned as well. This is a new class of robotic vehicle. We have not done excavation to this scale before. We've done excavation in the single kilograms, maybe tens of kilograms at most. We are talking 10,000 kilograms for this demonstration. So orders of magnitude more. Regolith excavation. The same goes for traversing distance. To do this kind of job, we're a robotic construction worker. We're not the robotic scientists that are on Mars. We do one task and we repeat that task over and over again. The vehicle needs to be robust. It needs to be simple, and it needs to survive operations of long traverses. So one of the demonstrations that we're looking at is actually putting the kilometers on this robot so that we can see the effects of it to make sure that we have designs that are appropriate for the future ISRU demonstrations that we want to do. This is a partnership with Kennedy Space Center, Johnson Space Center, JPL, and Astrobotic. Let's go to the next slide. I just wanted to give you guys a quick overview of kind of a notional concept of operations. The project is still relatively new. We worked on this past year. Hopefully this plays. Right. So this is again just notional, but this whole mission takes place on an area the size of about a baseball diamond, right? So it's not a large area. We don't need to go far. We need to demonstrate movement of surface regolith. That's the goal of this project. So it can all happen near the lander. Did the video pause for everyone else? I'm not seeing it run on my side anymore.
It's still running on our side.
Is it? Okay, well, I'll just go from memory then. So what we do here is we show the robot on the surface. We drive radially away from the lander, about 15, 16 meters. And then we're gonna complete a traverse of about 100 meters, but we're gonna do it in a lap around the lander that we come down on. Again, this project is not demonstrating autonomous navigation. There's several projects that are focusing on that. We are focusing on demonstrating excavation. So we are going to use the lander as a navigation aid for our autonomy software. This will ease some of our autonomy requirements. We show some April tag fiducials on there. That's just notional. We're still working out exactly how we're going to do the navigation aids from the lander. Once we complete a lap, the light gray area that we drive on is the excavation area. It's about the size of half of a volleyball court, about 3.5 inches deep. So 10,000 kilograms is a lot of regolith, but in terms of area, it's not that big of an area. And again, I'm going from memory here. It's not playing on my side, but we fill up the excavator. Once those are full, we come back to our driving path and we do a lap in the opposite direction back around the lander. We can repeat that process again over and over again, about 16 times until our battery is discharged. We can't carry solar panels on a vehicle like this because doing regolith excavation is very dusty. The solar panels would be pretty inefficient quickly. So we are looking at doing battery recharging, and we will come back to the lander. We are looking at a wireless charging system. Razer will connect to that wireless charging system, recharge its battery, and then go repeat that excavation cycle. And that whole process happens about 21 times over a 10, 11 day mission on the surface of the moon until we complete that full 10 metric tons of regolith excavation. And hopefully I timed it about right there, Jamie, on the video. Again, it's not playing on my side, so.
Well, I'm not sure. It looks good still. We'll ask a couple questions while it's still going. It's a nice thing to look at while you're talking.
Okay, all right, great.
One of the questions we got was, what does the wear look like for the bucket drums? Do you have an idea of the expected lifetime?
Sure. So we've done extensive testing here on the ground with lunar simulants. And to the amount that we're talking about, 10 metric tons, we're not going to see significant wear such that we have to worry about it. But it is something that we want to quantify on this mission to inform future projects. And so I think kind of one of our stretch goals is to do some imaging of those kind of wear surfaces before, during, and kind of after these excavation cycles, so that we can get a metric on that, and again, and use that to inform the future versions.
Okay, we had another question kind of in the same arena. How vulnerable to damage to things like boulders or mega regolith is the Razer?
Sure. So we actually, by doing this force balancing between the excavators, the excavation tools, we have to do a mode that we call auto dig, where we're constantly monitoring the excavation forces on the bucket drums and raising and lowering our arms to change our digging depth. When you have a tool like that, you also get the added benefit of kind of having an obstacle avoidance. So if we were to come upon, a deep buried rock, we call it like an iceberg rock, where just the tip is coming out of the top, but it's buried deep below the surface, it's immovable. That software actually can recognize an impact like that very early on before any damage occurs, and lift the arm and avoid that obstacle.
We have a couple more questions. We're just going to ask one more, and hopefully we can get to the other ones at the end if we have time.
Sure.
There's a question: how is regolith dust mitigation addressed?
That's a great question. So it is one of the challenges, right? So I mentioned about not having solar panels, so we can do this. The wireless charging is something that we're looking at. That is certainly helpful. We also have the same issue with thermal control. If you have radiators that are exposed to this dust and they get covered, it's going to really affect your efficacy of the radiator system. So we're looking at options for covers and phase change materials that can help mitigate that. And then we're working closely with the dust mitigation project on different technologies like electrostatic shields for camera lenses, and projects that are looking at state-of-the-art sealing technologies for rotary mechanisms. So that is something we're tracking, and it's definitely a challenge to work in that environment for a robot like this.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are some good questions.
Thanks.
And again, hopefully we will have time at the end for the last couple, but we'll keep going on. Next up, we have Daniel Andrews.
Good morning or afternoon, everybody. Very good. So my name is Dan Andrews, and I'm the project manager for the Viper mission. I just put together a really terse overview here. Happy to share this awesome mission with this group. Next slide. So I thought I would start by just providing some context of how Viper fits into the bigger agency Artemis program. You can see what we call the swoosh chart within NASA for the Artemis program with respect to returning humans to the moon and being able to sustain them. You can see in the yellow hoop down near the bottom, that is the Viper rover being represented. And a key thing to remember about Viper is, of course, you don't need a Viper mission to be able to return humans to the moon. But if you want to sustain humans on the moon, to make it economically viable, and there's even other reasons to want to be able to live off of the surface of the moon, in situ resource utilization, which we've heard about numerous times in just this meeting alone. So you need a Viper to be able to understand the nature of various volatiles on the surface and near surface of the moon, and be able to create resource maps and so forth. So that's how Viper fits within the bigger picture of Artemis. Next slide. So I thought I'd put together a kind of simple evolution of lunar resource exploration concept and be able to show where Viper fits. This is very analogous to how you might look for resources on Earth, with the difference being that you're not starting on Earth. And so it begins with orbital observations, the equivalent of ground surveys that you might do if it were a resource like crude or natural gas or other mineralogical things that you're looking for on Earth. But when you're looking extraterrestrial, so you would begin with orbital observations, move into orbital prospecting, which is a rather focused version of orbital observations. You would then need to do ground truthing. It's fine that you think you understand what's happening from orbit, but you really need to confirm that with ground truthing. And then a more focused version of ground truthing is actual prospecting, where you're narrowing your point of view on what you're trying to find and specifically targeting that. Further narrowing is resource mapping, where you're targeting specific items of interest, whatever they may be, and trying to lay them out against an XYZ grid, right? Depth from the surface of the soil. It could be atmospheric on planets where that's relevant, not relevant on the moon so much. And then you start moving into ISRU and mining demonstrations if the data supports that. If there is indication that there's resource that you're interested in, you want to start understanding how to go about getting it. So that previous presentation by Jason is just one example of how you might go about doing that type of thing. Ultimately, the goal would be bulk production. If you're really going to be harvesting in earnest, what might be available in situ to the place that you're at. So in the case of the moon, early indications from the Clementine mission and Lunar Prospector found exceptionally high indications of hydrogen signals in the polar regions of the moon, which is interesting, but can be concluded a number of different ways. And so after that, there was conjecture that maybe that's bound as water ice, but it wasn't definitive. And so missions subsequently went forward nearly a decade or more later to actually understand the nature of those volatiles. And so LRO and LCross were co-manifested. I was the project manager of LCross. Other missions have also gone there looking at different angles on this. And in the case of LCross, we were able to ground truth through an impactor mission that those hydrogen signals in the polar regions, in the case of LCross, we went to the South Pole and the Cabeus region, are indeed bound as water ice. The way that that mission worked was we sent an impactor in, which was actually the remnant of the upper stage of the rocket in which we left Earth. And then we flew through it with a lagging behind spacecraft that would take measurements and then ultimately meet its fate by impacting into the polar region as well. And we were able to detect actually water ice crystals and then also water ice vapor for those crystals that made it up into the sunlight. They were thrown off of the surface. Of course, they sublimed in the sun and went immediately to the vapors phase. So check, we now know that it is bound, at least in some level, as water ice. It kind of rewrote the books on how to go about and whether to go about looking for resources, volatile resources in particular on the moon. So that's the lead into Viper, which is the next natural step after you know that. If LCross and then other orbital missions like LRO, Chandrayaan, and so forth have quantified from orbit the nature of the volatiles, and LCross was able to do some scoping on maybe potential ore grade volume based on how much was thrown up and doing some extrapolations. The next step is to do meter level measurements. And that's where Viper comes in. Viper is a surface mobility mission whose job it is to actually do finer resolution on the ground truthing between superficial measurements down to 1 meter deep, and actually characterize and map the resources in a polar region based on 4 different ice stability regions, ISRs, as we've characterized them, and be able to then become the leverage point that future commercial and state-sponsored missions can use to go test new technologies and try things out. For example, if Viper concludes that there's usable, even if relatively faint, moisture signals that's near surface, how you would go about harvesting those would be a very different thing if what Viper discovers is bulk ice found, say, 1 meter deep. Those are entirely different engineering problems. And there's already, when you go and look at the space, there's lots of creative ideas out there, but they're aching to understand whether or not those clever ideas are relevant to the realities on the moon. So again, pointing back to how important Viper is to do that bridging for the future missions that would come afterwards. Next slide. Little teaser slide to just orient folks on Viper compared to its cadre. Along the bottom are some example Lunar rovers. Along the top are some example Mars rovers. And so they're trying to, these are all attempted to be represented at scale. One thing about Viper, which of course is in the bottom right corner there, its size fits nominally within what you would expect. You can see its mass. It's about 4 times faster than the Mars rovers, still slow by human experience. But in our case, because we're a solar powered mission, 100% of our energy comes from solar power, and then of course our onboard batteries. And we're in a polar region, which most folks realize is very dynamic from a sunlight point of view. That's why the polar region is so attractive to entrained volatiles. It's dark in many of the places, in some cases permanently shadowed. Viper has to be able to get in and around those with a very dynamic lighting environment. And so as a solar powered mission, it has to be able to move pretty quickly. It's also interesting that all of our heating to maintain our viability and the safety of our equipment when we're in these cold areas is also solar powered, right? It comes from just electrical power that we get through the solar rays. So we only have electric heaters. That's to keep things simple, and that's to turn around this mission relatively quickly. This mission is very different in a number of other ways outside of the actual function. Just how we're operating, how we're designing the mission leverages some very different approaches that we used on LCROSS, kind of path found on LCROSS to turn things around quickly with reasonable risk. So no plutonium, no polonium anywhere on Viper. That also makes it easier for the CLIPS host, who's going to be bringing us to the surface of the moon, in this case Astrobotic, because they don't have all the complexities associated with that. So I have lots of videos that I did not put in this package since I know we just wanted a tight front end of this presentation. Next slide. But I look forward to the discussions going forward. Thank you very much.
Well, you have a couple questions here. The first one is, has Viper chosen a landing site yet?
Yeah, we released, what was it, maybe 3 weeks ago, maybe pushing a month, the region that we're going to be going to, which is in the Nobile region, Nobile crater, one of the craters, notable craters on the south pole of the moon. We did an extensive trade within the South Pole to try and understand that nice risk opportunity balance. In the case of Viper, as I noted, we're solar powered, but as with any mobility mission, you have to look at the terrain. You have to look at navigability. In our case, we're a direct to Earth communications means because there's no orbiting relay comm yet in place on the moon, although that's certainly coming. And so all of these things on top of the fact of good science, those 4 ice stability regions I was describing, got a massive Venn diagram to go through that. And we think the Nobile region is a really nice sweet spot for mixing, getting all the science we needed to get done in a reasonable risk format, and works well with the lander provider, right? Astrobotic through the CLIPS program to be able to land in the area. So that's where we're going.
Okay, another one is, can you comment on the potential ISRU PSR demo mission? What lessons learned from Viper do you already have that could inform this follow-on?
So one of the things that we will be picking up, there's a number of different things that we will pick up in an ancillary way by just executing the Viper mission, by just doing it. We're going to learn a lot about the soil conditions, which is going to be huge. Remember, the LCROSS mission found some very curious and maybe alarming things associated with the permanently shadowed region. And that is that they are incredibly fluffy, like the softest talc. We saw as the impactor went into Cabeus crater, the thermal signature was delayed enough that it was showing us it was just going through the fluffiest talc until we started seeing some indication of thermal rise as we were looking down into the bore of that impact. That is concerning if you're a surface mission, to be able to understand the nature and navigate such a tenuous environment. That's one of the reasons I didn't bring this up before, but Viper itself, you notice it looks very different than a traditional rover. It's because it's specifically designed for the nature of a South Pole lunar mission, and PSRs in particular. We actually have full articulation wheel and steering capabilities, including shoulder joints. We can move our CG around actively. We could actually rock back on 3 of the wheels and pull 1 wheel out of a really soft spot if we find that that's the case, and be able to move away on 3 wheels. So we made the judgment that in an area where no one's ever been before, no robot has ever been before, and with the indications of L-cross of it being potentially treacherous, we're going to go find out the reality there, and we have a pretty capable rover. And I think all of that is very extensible to future missions, and especially when we go into PSR.
Once there is a resource map developed by NASA, will it be available by companies? Is there any data from craters on the poles, charge, spectra, etc.?
Yeah, as with frankly all NASA missions, all the data that we get from this will be made available through planetary data system, right? Where we ship all of our information after we get it and collate it and do all the processing on it and so forth. And you remember from my chart that I showed earlier, it's the intention that the findings from this mission, whether they're what we expect or whether we're completely surprised, what matters isn't what we thought was going to happen. What matters is what we find. And so all that data will be made available and be a leverage point for future commercial and state-sponsored activities.
We'll take this one last question for you, Dan. Your graphic indicates that NASA intends no further water prospecting after Viper. Do you intend all water missions to be commercial after Viper?
It isn't actually what I showed in the graphic. I showed a bunch of commercials staggering down after that to try and show there is a whole commercial thread that I think will be vibrant. But if you notice horizontally going across, it said future science missions. So I think the future of exploration in this area, both for science benefit and for exploration benefit. So meaning, how's the water there? How's it being entrained? What other things are there? Is there a water cycle? Those are all very science-oriented questions that NASA will continue to have. And then there's the more usage-based exploration needs. Can you harvest it? How do you bottle it? How do you crack it? Make oxygen, make water, make hydrogen for rocket fuel. There's more the utility side of it. Both of those are going to be active areas of interest, both commercially and by state sponsors. My diagram was intending to show future NASA missions out in that science thread. Sorry if that was.
Thank you very much. And our next up is Dan Hendrickson here in person. I've wiped it off for you. Good and clean.
Good morning, everyone. And my name is Dan Hendrickson with Astrobotic, a lunar logistics company based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This morning, I'll be speaking specifically to our CubeRover platform. So next slide, please. So first, just to kind of speak in the context of Astrobotic and how kind of CubeRover fits into our overall services and capabilities. You may be familiar with our lander delivery services. Peregrine and Griffin are our 2 lander vehicles that you can see in the upper top left corner. But we've always, from the very beginning of our program, started back more than a decade ago, we've always envisioned mobility to be a key extension of those lander delivery services. So it's always been kind of part and parcel to how we think of getting payloads to the surface and then providing them the capabilities that they need in order to operate. So with that in mind, we've developed 2 rover product lines in particular. Polaris is a much larger vehicle, carrying 90 kilograms of payload capacity. That's more of like a pickup truck, if you will, extending off of a vehicle like Griffin. But then at the smaller scale, we have CubeRover, which is a vehicle that's meant to really create on-ramps for a variety of different customers around the world to be able to operate, carry out payload mobility, but not have to make the major investment of building up a rover from scratch. So that's kind of the basis and the primary genesis of why we developed CubeRover. But maybe just to also highlight, because we consider ourselves a true lunar logistics company, we've got a number of other developments and programs that we're developing in support of our lander programs and our rover programs, which you can see in blue. On the lander side, we've specialized in really leading the effort for precision landing, as well as mission simulation, which we can use for precision landing, as well as surface operations for product lines like CubeRover or Polaris. We're also one of the VSAT selectees under that program with STMD, so we're very excited to be in that program, and we're thinking a lot about lunar power and recognizing the needs that our customers and the world really will have on the surface, and so it's a major area of interest for us. We're also developing with a partner company, Robotic, wireless chargers for the lunar surface, which work quite well with CubeRover and also other larger mobility platforms. That's an area where it's helpful to have that capability for the dust environment on the surface. Next slide, please. So just to kind of also put the context of our mission manifest, we're flying next year, mid-2022, our first lander delivery mission, that's Peregrine. So we're very excited to be in the integration phase right now. So a lot of activity happening at our Pittsburgh-based headquarters. We also have Moon Ranger, which is more of a one-off platform, which will be doing some autonomy testing on the surface. This is a CLIPS payload that's flying on another CLIPS lander. So that'll be flying in Q4 of 2023. And it'll also be carrying a neutron spectrometer on board that vehicle. And then as Dan Andrews mentioned prior, we're carrying the NASA Viper rover on board our Griffin lander in Q4 of 2023. So we're humbled and excited, and lots of progress happening on that mission. Next slide. So to speak a little bit more directly about CubeRover in particular with that context in mind, CubeRover is very much a modular platform. It was designed so that a variety of different payloads could easily and very simply integrate directly onto a mobility platform. You can kind of see in the form factor, the primary sort of box that's, we got the MLI in the image there. That's where the payload goes. So this is kind of a representative payload in this image. So it's very payload centric. It's a chassis with wheels with a variety of different ways of mounting. And it's really meant to accommodate a variety of different kinds of use cases on the surface. Provides a lot of the same kinds of services that our lander delivery services do. So we provide power, communications. We also provide data storage and thermal control, which is actually an additional step up from the lander services. So it provides a bit more, recognizing that payloads need that for their mobility. Next slide. So CubeRover is like the namesake sounds, similar to CubeSats. We use the same form factors. For instance, talking about our 2U CubeRover that carries 2 units of payload like in a CubeSat with the same 10 by 10 by 10 centimeter, 1 kilogram form factor. That's really building off of all of the success that's occurred in CubeSats and really migrating that now to mobility on the surface. You can see kind of ideally where one of those payloads would be placed directly under that avionics chassis there. It's also possible to mount above that deck. So again, it was really designed with payload users in mind. That was our primary objective, is serving them when we designed CubeRover. Next slide. So we've got a variety of different form factors that scale directly. You can see here our 2U, our 4U, our 6U. It does go up to 24U, so you can actually accomplish quite a bit with the CubeRover platform, and the scalability has also been baked in from the very beginning of our design. As mentioned, we provide kind of the same sorts of standard power communication services that the lander provides. And so with every kilogram of payload capacity that's purchased, we provide those commodity services, and it scales accordingly with larger CubeRover scales. Next slide. So we really feel like CubeRovers are that their use case has really come into their own at the moment. So there's a lot of really compelling reasons to utilize CubeRovers as we think about more dynamic activities on the lunar surface. So for instance, CubeRovers can be used to actually go and drive out in front of a much more expensive asset. So you could imagine a much larger rover being one that's a bit more precious. You could have a much less expensive CubeRover actually drive out in front, survey the landscape, work in tandem, work almost as a marsupial to a larger rover. We also imagine use cases and are seeing potential use cases for CubeRovers where you actually have them swarm and they work together. So you can accomplish that much more with these smaller vehicles. And also provide, hopefully at some point, sort of a fleet that can do prospecting on a large scale. So this could be a capability that could follow up from missions like Viper in the future, and hopefully do large scale prospecting and a variety of other resource-minded activities. You can also see on the right a variety of different instrument types, neutron specs, for instance, gravimeters, magnetometers, et cetera. CubeRover has been, again, designed from the start to serve payload needs. And so we've already seen a number of interesting use cases that we think can make, can utilize the utility. Next slide. So in terms of robotic demonstrators, the title of the panel today, we're excited to have a CubeRover on an Astrobotic lander flight in 2024. So we've been making quite a bit of progress toward that, and I'll highlight some of that here in a moment. Next slide, please. So we've been focusing on mechanical interface development, the primary services. We've got a lot of that material at the ready for all of our payload customers to begin utilizing. You can kind of see some of the overall specifications and services that we offer. A lot of this is highlighted in our payload users guide, which is available on our website and can be reviewed and discussed as well with our CubeRover team. Next slide. Similarly, we've got well-defined electrical and data interfaces. So as mentioned, we not only provide power like on the lander services, but we also provide data storage and thermal control. So that's all been outlined and is pretty well understood at this point with all the interfaces so that payload designers can take that information and start designing right now. Next slide. And then we provide a computing platform. So again, on the lander side, it's a little less facilitated for things like data storage and processing. On CubeRover, we actually provide that computing platform, recognizing that our payload customers need that and that it helps them achieve their mission. So we provided that with a computing platform that we developed internally at Astrobotic. Next slide. So this is just some footage of some things that we've done in that campaign 2 flight that we're planning for. On the far left, you can see a pull test that we've done. In the middle, a shake table testing with the actual CubeRover platform that's been done at our Pittsburgh headquarters at our fabrication lab. And then some mobility testing on the right to kind of show some of the clearances that our platform offers. The mobility test campaign is complete. We've done vibration and vacuum chamber testing on all the major subassemblies of CubeRover. And now we're proceeding to the full system vibe, thermal vac, EMI, dust and radiation testing, which is nearing completion. So the platform is getting ever closer to being ready to be utilized on a flight in the very near future. Next slide. And then lastly, I'll just kind of note, there's been a lot of heritage that's gone into this program. We've done quite a bit over the years. We've leveraged 14 years of lunar payload delivery service heritage at the company. We've been in business for quite some time, focusing on the moon for quite some time. We've been working with NASA on a variety of different contracts over those years, 22 for lunar rover related contracts that we've completed. We've delivered engineering unit to KSC in 2020. Of CubeRover. We've also provided, or we're in production right now on 2 CubeRover flight units, and then 4 engineering units are also in production. So we consider this a product line. We imagine it being utilized over and over again. The design can be utilized over and over again by a variety of different payload customers. And again, we see this opportunity for a variety of CubeRovers being utilized all at once in things like swarms and prospecting. And so we'll probably start with maybe a few doing individual payloads, but over time, we see this as one of the interesting and I think efficient ways to operate on the surface and to use fleets of them at a time. Next slide. So I'll just again iterate, if you're interested in learning more about CubeRover and would like to design a payload for its use, certainly get in touch with us. And on our website, you can find our CubeRover Payload Users Guide, which outlines all the important specifications and services to help you get started. Thank you very much. So just looking at some of the questions here, one was, would your wireless charger be available to charge other potential surface assets, or do you envision it being solely for Astrobotic use? We do envision it actually being available for a variety of different users on the lunar surface, as well as in space. We're looking at it even beyond just the moon. So we're definitely interested in providing that capability for a variety of different users, not just us. So as mentioned, Prism 2 will have a rover payload limit requiring 15 kilograms. What will you do with the remaining 9 kilograms if and when you provide a rover to Prism 2? So there's a variety of different opportunities there. I mean, again, CubeRover can be scaled to specific payload classes. That would be one option. It would be to scale just to that need. But then also there are scenarios where we've actually had concepts where we utilize multiple different kinds of payloads on a single CubeRover. So similar to our lander delivery services, where we'll have a variety of different kinds of payloads on a single lunar lander, we can similarly do that with CubeRover. And obviously there's some deconfliction that we have to have on maybe where the rover goes and what it does, but there is opportunities actually to hopefully make use of space. We don't want to have payload capacity that goes unused for certain. Okay. As mentioned, that CubeRover can go up to 24U. What leads to that limit? So right now we're thinking about sort of the immediate needs. And if you have several 24Us, we think there's some interesting missions that can be accomplished together with that. I don't think there's anything really inhibiting or prohibiting us to go even beyond that. But at some point, there is, I think, efficiencies to be had on things like structures where it makes sense to make the jump up to a Polaris class vehicle. And that's really been optimized and made to be more efficient for that capacity.
I'm not going to wipe this off while I'm talking on it because that would make scary sounds. Okay, we have one more today, and let's bring up Matt Atwell.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, well, guys, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt Atwell. I'm the project manager for the Micronova deployable hopper, and I work for Intuitive Machines. So I'll give you a quick overview of the flight demo that we're going to fly next year. I'll tell you about the spacecraft and some of its capabilities, and then we'll dive into some detailed ConOps. So first off, this demonstration mission, it's funded by NASA SGMD Tipping Point program, which has been targeting new technologies for extreme access and extreme environments, as you're aware. We are targeting a November 2022 launch date for this demo mission, and it's going to fly on our Nova C lunar lander. It'll fly to the lunar South Pole. As you're probably aware, Prime 1 is also scheduled to fly on that same mission. So this is IM2, and we're going to go to the Shackleton Connecting Ridge. I think we just actually publicly announced that landing site yesterday. So it's going to be an exciting place to go explore on the moon. This spacecraft, when we land, it will deploy from Nova C. It will perform multiple demonstration flights, ending with a flight into and then back out of a permanently shadowed region. Lastly, this spacecraft is going to host 2 demonstration science payloads as a part of this mission, and those are led by Arizona State. So a little bit more about the spacecraft. So we're developing it as a versatile platform. We want it to be able to execute multiple types of missions. So in this demo mission configuration, it weighs about 30 kilograms, and it hosts about 1 kilogram worth of payload, and it has enough fuel to travel just over 10 kilometers in a one-way trajectory. Now, this is all scalable to larger class of vehicles. So without changing any of the structure, we can scale up to a 60 kilogram vehicle just by increasing the size of the propellant tank. And that can increase our range over 100 kilometers. And so we really view this platform as kind of a regional explorer in a way that, for a short 14-day Eclipse mission, you can travel really, really far distances without having to survive the lunar night. So the spacecraft, it flies from spot to spot via a monopropellant propulsion system. It utilizes a suite of sensors and algorithms that are based on our Nova C landing system for GNNC. The system includes visual odometry for high accuracy state determination, and hazard detection and avoidance algorithms. So we can avoid small obstacles that might represent hazards towards tip over. So we can really detect and avoid obstacles down to about 8 centimeters in size, which is small enough to fit neatly below our thrusters and prevent us from tipping over even at our worst case landing states. So for power, obviously you see the side mounted solar arrays there. So we use that not just for power, which provides adequate margin even with quite a bit of dust. I think we're protecting for about 40% degradation due to dust, and we still have pretty large margins on our idle state, but also as a sun shield. So it keeps really the entire spacecraft at a nice cool state and allows us to really focus on using heater control for thermal management. And we don't really have to worry too much about hot things. For communication, we're using a Nokia LTE radio, which is actually also being developed under a tipping point demonstration project. So this radio is capable of downlink speeds as high as 75 megabits per second, which enables very high resolution imagery and video to be downlinked. The system downlinks data to Nova C, which is our lunar lander, and that vehicle then forwards that data to the ground. So really taking advantage of the larger host spacecraft, serving as kind of a link between the ground so that we don't have to carry the type of power you would need for a direct to earth link. Another great benefit of this new technology that Nokia is demonstrating is we actually believe we're going to have a little bit of data downlink available inside the PSR. So when we originally did a lot of the mission planning, we assumed we wouldn't get any data until we flew back out of the PSR, but we've since through some analysis become quite confident that we'll at least get a little bit of data out, so we'll know the state of the vehicle inside the PSR. So the primary objective of this mission is to demonstrate the mobility technology. So we'll be doing multiple flights on the surface to demonstrate our ability to hold attitudes, to have stable platform for science measurements, to land safely, to land accurately. And but with that, we also want to demonstrate the utility as a science platform. And so we're flying 2 dedicated science instruments, as I mentioned. One of them is a set of canadensis cameras that will be taking high resolution imagery of the surface. And it also will be taking imagery inside the PSR. We'll have a suite of red, green, and blue LED lighting that will allow us to take essentially color imagery of the regolith inside the PSR. The second instrument I mentioned is a radiometer that's being built by DLR in Germany. And that radiometer will take very accurate temperature measurements inside the PSR. So the science data we're going to get from this technology demo mission is going to be really, really great. Next slide, please. Okay, so what I have here is a notional mission. I know the line's kind of hard to see, but notional mission plan for this mission. And you can see the white arrows show notional landing sites for the hopper. So the first thing that happens when we land is we actually deploy from Nova C. And the way we do this is maybe a little sportier than what you've been used to seeing on other missions, but we actually fly off the vehicle. It turns out that from a mass standpoint, from a system simplicity standpoint, it's the simplest way. So we have some guide rails, and once we disconnect our umbilicals and our hard tie down points, we'll fire our thrusters and fly off the vehicle. We'll land about 20 or 30 meters away. We'll be landing in terrain that's been well imaged by Nova C, so we'll have a pretty good idea of safe landing site, and so we won't have to do hazard detection for that first flight. Second flight is going to be a smaller, a short 50 to 100 meter flight where we'll do a prop optimized trajectory. We'll demonstrate safe takeoff and landing from the surface. We'll demonstrate landing accuracy. We'll demonstrate our first hazard detection and avoidance, and we'll get some initial imagery. The third flight is actually a longer flight where we're going to do a constant altitude traverse. And so the idea behind this flight is it's going to allow us to take stereo imagery at the 1 centimeter per pixel resolution, looking straight down, as well as I think 3 centimeter per pixel resolution looking up in this image. And so we're going to get some really awesome stereo imagery of this terrain at a resolution that really we don't have at this point. The fourth flight is probably the most exciting flight, where we're going to actually fly into Marston Crater, as he's been calling this permanently shadowed region here. We're going to fly in and start taking our scientific readings. We will have temperature sensors monitoring all of our important instruments, important vehicle systems to verify that we are staying above operational temperature limits. And if at any point we reach those limits before the end of the data gathering phase, the system will autonomously decide to abort that phase of the mission and fly back out. to save the data that's already been acquired. And then lastly, we'll fly back out and we'll land. We'll probably land pretty close to where we had started from, just from a simplicity standpoint. We know that trajectory was safe. We know the landing site was safe. Once we land, we'll transmit the rest of the data back to NOVA-C. And at that point, any remaining fuel will be used to do secondary mission objectives. So that's the overview for this flight demo. Does anybody have any questions?
We're going to take this one question. It says, Dan Andrews was saying that the surface at the poles are extremely soft. Have you prepared for that?
Sure. So we've done quite a bit of modeling of our landing foot pads with different densities of regolith, different friction. So not just the consistency of the regolith, but also the friction. There's a lot of different factors that we've been looking at with respect to tip over. So it's obviously one of the big concerns with our vehicle is how well, how much tolerance do we have to tip over as we land with a system that's never flown on the moon before. And so we've been doing quite a bit of testing with different types of regolith. I do think that there's maybe some more data for L-Cross that we should go take a look at to see if we can learn some more about the environment we're going to be going into, though.
I lied. We're going to take one more because I like this question. As a commercial company, will the data sets collected be shared publicly?
Yes. Yep. So as a part of this mission, all of our data is going to be really managed by Arizona State, and they will be putting everything in PDS and following the standard protocols for NASA PDS.
Thank you very much. Can we have another round of applause for our panel today?